Dan Povenmire just posted a video that answers a question I've had for years. He explained the story behind a super random line in Phineas and Ferb.
We were just looking for little bits of conversation that would hint at a much larger conversation, and we just put it right in.
In this video, I'm going to break down that episode, Road to Danville, for all the behind-the-scenes details and Easter eggs you might have missed. And stick with me because this episode touches on a super important, under-discussed topic that I'm going to get into. Okay, let's dive in. Instead of getting his mission from Major Monogram, we join Perry right as he's breaking into Doof's building, where he's greeted with an unenthusiastic, "Oh, it's you."
Oh, it's you.
When Perry looks around for a trap, Doof explains that he has a major role in a play and needs to take over the tri-state area by 3:30, so he's not late. His solution is to send Perry away with his trip to the desert innator, which, might I just say, for someone who tries every day to take over the tri-state area and has never been successful, this is quite a presumptuous plan. Anyway, this is no ordinary machine. It's actually a double innator.
Don't bother running, because I've installed a Perry track innator.
I wonder if that's what this part of the machine is. Well, as you probably expected, Doof's plan backfires and he gets sent to the desert with Perry. Lucky for Perry, he brought his jetpack, so he starts to leave, but Doof convinces him to give him a ride by saying,
And if this works out, I might give up evil for acting. Won't you give me that chance?
And like so many failed acting dreams, this doesn't end up happening. But in future episodes, we do see Doofenshmirtz give up evil. We've seen him as a teacher, a secret agent, and even as a world-famous scientist in Milo Murphy's Law. But Doof's pleading doesn't stop there. He also says,
Do it for the kids. Do it for the orphans that I might perform in front of someday if I ever do a show in an orphanage.
Which is a common sentiment with no single origin point that I can find, but it could be a reference to 2.5 Men.
This is for all the orphans out there.
It also reminds me of this from WandaVision.
For the children.
For the children.
Doof should be grateful that Perry isn't like Steven.
I hate all the orphans in the whole world.
Because he takes pity on Doof and gives him a ride on his jetpack, which strangely enough we've seen happen before back in the Magnificent Few episode, you're gonna notice pretty quickly that this whole episode is basically just Doof talking. Since Phineas and Ferb only get like 30 seconds of screen time and Perry doesn't talk, he's the star of the show. In fact, he references this a bit later.
To be fair, the burden of conversation is kind of all on me in our relationship.
Apparently, Doofenshmirtz never internalized the saying, beggars can't be choosers, because he complains about the jetpack not going fast enough. Which, side note, if he wasn't weighing it down, it would be going much faster.
I don't want to be ungrateful or anything, but is there any way to speed this up? I gotta be in the makeup chair at 4 o'clock.
Anyway, he hastily hits the turbo button, and they both fall off. One really great animation detail here is the way Perry responds when he hits the ground. Watch how he immediately jumps up without delay. Those are his animal instincts and reflexes coming into play. And it's just a small thing, but it helps us feel a deeper understanding of his character. Also, I never noticed this the dozens of times I've watched this episode in my life before going through it with a fine-tooth comb for this breakdown. But Doof says,
Nice. I should have just trapped you. I could have been out of the hospital and on my way to the theater by now.
Apparently he ends up in the hospital every day after his fight with Perry. What a hilarious bit of world building. Okay, this next section is my favorite part of the episode. Doof and Perry walk through the desert by themselves. We get a great song, Heck of a Day. And we cut in and out of their conversations. It really illustrates the hilarity of Doofenshmirtz's character. He starts by commenting about how warm it is, even though that is painfully obvious for everyone since they're outside, in the desert, in the middle of summer.
But I feel like it's unseasonably warm out here. I feel warm. Do you feel warm?
Then he calls out the common trope whenever deserts are depicted.
Why do we always see cow skulls in the desert? And why do you only see the skull? Did the body die somewhere else? It makes no sense.
And I can't help but wonder if this fascination of his is why his alternate dimension self has an entire skeleton in his office. When Perry ignores him and keeps walking, Doof remarks,
Oh, I'm sorry. Am I talking too much for you? Fine, I'll be quiet. I can shut up. I don't have to talk all the time. It's not like I have to fill the space. If you want silence, I'll give you silence. You watch. And it's gonna be deafening. Mark my words.
This is a reference to the movie The Odd Couple, but I can't seem to find the clip anywhere, so you'll just have to take my word for it. But it does remind me of my wife trying not to talk when she has a sore throat. I love you, sweetie. And it also reminds me of one of my favorite GIFs.
What is he babbling about? He's like the thing that wouldn't shut up.
Doof comments on the phrase, "mark my words," and accidentally fries his eyeball by looking at the sun through a magnifying glass. But that's not even the best part. In fact, the reason I'm doing the breakdown of this episode right now is because Dan Povenmire just shared a bit of the behind the scenes of how this next clip was conceived.
Our executive in third season of Phineas and Ferb was Jill Sanford, and she had just gone to Vegas with some friends, and the taxi drive to the airport, she was telling us about this very talkative taxi driver she had who was complaining because his girlfriend lived in Los Angeles because she was trying to work in television, and he wanted her to move to Vegas to be with him. And she made a very good point, was like, he's a taxi driver. He can live anywhere. And he's just expecting her to move to Vegas.
I mean, he drives a taxi, for heaven's sake. He can work anywhere, but he expects her to just pack up and move to Vegas. I mean, seriously.
Next, we get the conclusion of this gem of a story.
I was sure my arm would grow back, but it never did. See? Pure titanium.
He could possibly be referencing the Flop Stars episode where he gets stepped on by a giant building with only his left arm sticking out. And strangely enough, we later find out that his other arm is metal too.
It isn't the time I got my arm stuck under that boulder. Also titanium now, see?
And that of itself is a reference to the remarkable true story of Aaron Routson, who was forced to amputate his own arm after being trapped by a boulder, as dramatized in the movie 127 Hours. And the last part of this section is when Doof says,
I know nothing about your private life. You're very closed off.
I think this is funny because the very nature of a private life is that other people wouldn't know about it. I love the song that plays during all of this, but there's one line that doesn't seem quite accurate. But the fact is that Perry is very missed, especially in the "Oh, There You Are, Perry" episode, where the boys spend all day trying to find him.
Come home, Perry, come home.
Okay, a little bit of wildlife spotting here. We get this great shot of vultures circling in the sky. And there's a scorpion right here. Wait a second. Vulture, scorpion. Those are both Spider-Man villains. In fact, Doof says he was sure his arm was going to grow back. And that's exactly how Dr. Connors becomes a Spider-Man villain, the Lizard. Weird. Wait, I missed one more random Doof story.
So I never touched an iguana again. Actually, that's not entirely true. There was one time back at...
I wonder if Dan Povenmire will ever explain this line. Here's to hoping. This is actually interesting because Doof walks right past a broken down car to point out 2 tires and an axle. Presumably the car would be easier to fix than the tires, unless they once belonged to that car. Then he does a bit of false introspection, saying,
I've realized that the thing that's kept me from succeeding all these years isn't my parents not showing up for my birth. It isn't my 8-month stint as an organ grinder monkey. It isn't the time I got my arm stuck under that boulder. Also titanium now, see? It isn't any of those things. You know what it is? It's you. You are what's been holding me back all these years.
Okay, a few things here. Number 1, when he says, my parents not showing up for my birth, that's a reference to this part of his backstory that we learned back in the Raging Bully episode.
It all began on the day of my actual birth. Both of my parents failed to show up.
Number 2, apparently he was an organ grinder monkey for 8 months. An organ grinder monkey refers to the small monkeys that traditionally accompanied the street performers that used a hand-cranked barrel organ. Not only is this significant because it's tragic, but also because Doof was raised by ocelots, so this isn't actually the first time he's been treated like a literal animal by society.
You're lucky you're legally considered an ocelot, or you wouldn't be here at all.
And number 3, it's ironic that he thinks Perry has been holding him back all these years, because that's literally part of Perry's job as a secret agent to hold back Doof from succeeding with his evil plans. But we all know it's really been more of Doof holding himself back due to incompetence. Okay, phew. That was a lot jammed into one little snippet of dialogue. To prove his point, Doof disobeys Perry and the no trespassing sign, climbs the fence, and proceeds to get zapped, presumably it was an electric fence, chased by guard dogs, and then set off 3 bear traps. If you listen closely, you can hear all those things, including the snapping of bear traps.
Okay, all I have to do is...
Then, just like in most abusive relationships, he blames Perry for his own problems.
But did you have to let me trip all 3 bear traps? I mean, come on. I'm out here in the hot sun working on ways to get us back to Danville, and you've never even offered me so much as a glass of water.
Perry, being way too nice, actually goes to get him water, but Doofenshmirtz mistakes his absence for abandonment and heads off on his own. We see some tumbleweed blow by, and I have to say, I always thought tumbleweed was a made-up thing just to emphasize the loneliness in cartoons and movies until I went to Idaho for the first time, and I can confirm that tumbleweed is very much real. But I digress. Doofenshmirtz doesn't fare so well by himself, blabbering on to no one about his tragic childhood.
And I said I wanted a sea otter for Christmas. They said I had to pick my present from the bottom shelf of the kitchen caustics aisle of the supermarket, so I picked the oven cleaner. I love that oven cleaner. Oven cleaner!
The way he says, oven cleaner, reminds me of how he says,
baloney!
So Doof lucks his way to a bus stop, pleads with the driver with seemingly legitimate remorse, and eventually gets on the bus when Perry shows up with tickets. You can see on the tickets that they say one-way fare to Danv, presumably short for Danville. Doofenshmirtz calls Perry a mensch, which is a Yiddish term for a person of integrity, honor, and decency.
Okay, the Platypus, you're a mensch!
Throughout this entire episode, Doofenshmirtz has been legitimately manipulative and abusive to Perry. From victim shaming to lack of gratitude to insincerity, he demonstrates what real-world evil looks like. It continues. He sheds a tear and saves it, saying,
See? A tear, the universal secretion for sincerity.
Which is another tactic people use for manipulation. And we know that Doofenshmirtz isn't being sincere because when the bus driver doesn't let Perry on the bus because he's an animal, Doof responds,
Tough break. Thanks for the ticket, though. Sweet, it's air conditioned in here.
Look, Doof turns it around and ends up helping Perry. We'll get to that in a minute. But let me take a moment and be real. If anyone watching this recognizes Doof's behavior in people in your life, know that it is not right. Constantly blaming others, leeching off them, victim shaming, manipulating, these are all examples of domestic abuse. We all deserve better than that. If you are in an abusive relationship, please seek help. There are lots of great resources out there. This is a serious issue that affects 33% of women and 25% of men in the world. It is everywhere. In this case, it can make for a funny villain who is anything but self-aware, but know that you don't need to put up with that kind of behavior in your own life. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox. Let's get back to the episode. Doof chats this lady's ear off about his situation, and as soon as she gets a chance to speak, he cuts her off.
First it would roll out.
Enough of your blabbering on and on.
Their conversation includes Doofenshmirtz stating that he has no Ruths. We're all familiar with the term ruthless, but apparently a Ruth is an old English word for compassion that is not used anymore. So he's saying he has no compassion. But it's still a funny turn of phrase from the person who says,
As usual, your timing is uncanny. And by uncanny, of course, I mean completely canny.
He asked the lady if she likes kreplach, which are like small stuffed dumplings. Then he sees Perry's jetpack stuck in the mouth of a fiberglass dinosaur on the side of the road, which is a reference to the Cabazon dinosaurs in California, made famous by an appearance in Pee-wee's Big Adventure. So he signals to the driver to stop the bus, and you can hear the other passengers' frustration.
What's going on? Hey, what gives?
Must be New Yorkers on that bus. Meanwhile, Perry is walking by himself, sweating milk, when Doof arrives to rescue him.
Am I sweating milk?
Then they speed off with Doof singing his own theme music, mimicking Perry's. In order to make it back in time for the play, Perry turns on the turbo switch. And Doofenshmirtz's apprehension is a satire on overly dramatic action films. The play itself is called The Pizza Man Cometh, which is a reference to The Iceman Cometh. And we hear an actress say,
I shall never go hungry again.
which is a line from Gone with the Wind.
I'll never be hungry again.
And Doofenshmirtz crashes in just in time to say his line.
Pizza delivery!
At this point, you may be asking yourself, hey, where's Phineas? The kids get a short storyline in this episode. In fact, it opens with Phineas saying,
Ferb, I know what we're gonna do today.
Apparently they decided to make a quilt, and I would feel the same way Buford does.
A quilt? No way! I mean, I know it's been a long summer, and you guys are running out of ideas, and
But he reluctantly decides to stay and diffuses the awkward silence by saying,
Quick, somebody say, where's Perry?
Where's Petty?
by the time we check back in with them at the end of the episode, Buford has definitely had a change of heart.
I never thought quilting could be so much fun. Thinking of possibilities. Needlepoint, embroidery, tapestry. I'm heading down to the fabric store right now.
He would love Hamilton, Missouri. But the rest of the group does not feel the same way. In fact, Ferb even feels strongly enough to speak up.
Actually, I didn't find it all that exciting.
Yeah, me either.
Never getting nap day back. Ooh, stinkaroo.
This is the second time they regretted their day's activity.
Yep, it took a whole lot of toil, pain, sweat, and hard work to build this town. We should be proud.
Let's never do that again.
Agreed. Come on, let's go inside the house for a snack.
And air conditioning.
An indoor...
And if you look closely at the quilt they made, you can see triangles and rectangles, probably a visual reference to Phineas and Ferb's geometric head shapes. And there is a similar shade of pink to Isabella's classic style, but nothing that reminds us of Buford or Baljeet. Last but not least, the episode title, Road to Danville, is an allusion to the 1940 buddy comedy movie, Road to Singapore, starring Bing Crosby and Bob Hope, that spawned the other Road to movies. This episode is great for so many reasons, not least of which being how much we learned about Doofenshmirtz. There are so many nuggets about his childhood and life that we were able to pick up on. If you want to see a breakdown of his first origin story, make sure to check out this video right here. And until next time, remember, there's no platypus controlling you.
There's no platypus controlling me.
Well, it counts. It doesn't